Hello, it's Dave Ward, and I'm here with Alan Black from Blackad.
Good morning.
And we had a chat in the pub a week or two ago that we thought might be interesting to have a little bit of a natter around. And we'll try a new format, which is 5 minutes on. This is a timey timer. We haven't seen one of these. They're hard to get your hands on, but there's a beautifully simple thing. 5 minutes on the clock, and it beeps when it's done. The topic that we were chatting about in the pub was chatbots. Chatbots, if you don't know what they are, you haven't stumbled upon one, or the new big thing. Essentially, the ability, like Siri on your phone, to ask a question, and using your voice, essentially, you're navigating to get the right answer. So if it was with your bank, you could ask, "What's my balance?" And more recently, we're starting to see things like celebrities. So one I was playing with previously was Selena Gomez, where you could ask, "When's your next tour date, Selena?" and she would answer. And yes, that led us to the question of, well, if you're going to make a chatbot, how do you make a chatbot that is on brand? Selena Gomez, fair enough, and even that's going to be really hard for that to do that whenever it's supposed to be doing it organically.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're somebody like Lloyd's Bank, how on earth do you get tone of voice right? So Alan is copywriting king, content master extraordinaire. So I thought it was an interesting chat. So what's your take on it?
So when we think about how you would typically do it, in the traditional world, you get your brand values, brand personality, all the brand material, turn that into some brand language guides, and go off and just make sure that all your people, when they're writing, write to that guide. Simplifying it, obviously. How the hell do you do it for a chatbot? Well, you and I were talking. One of the things that came up was the idea of you probably need to take a slightly different approach. In the way that digital animators at Pixar, you were telling me, get trained as actors before they start picking up, a Wacom tablet.
Because a friend of mine told me this, is that they have to, if you're going to draw somebody tripping up over a stone, well, the way that somebody does that in a movie is often different to real life.
Sure.
And just understanding how the body moves.
Sure.
So being taught how to act tripping up on a stone will help you to draw it.
And I felt that was a really interesting analogy, in that when you think about the way actors will develop character, so you think about say directors like Ken Loach. Ken Loach is in the news at the moment because he's just released a fabulous movie, and he tends to work in a very collaborative way. They tend to rehearse everything out, and I'm sure there's a script, but it tends to be more of an arc that they'll work to. And the actors will bring their own dialogue to those pieces as well.
Oh, right.
So they're creating a lot of the dialogue themselves, similar to like shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm. So a lot of that dialogue is essentially busked out on that take by the actors. But to get to that point, you've got to really know the character.
Yes.
And they've got to workshop that to goodness knows what degree.
Yeah.
And what we were thinking about was, is that going to be a model for creating chatbots, perhaps?
Yeah, and the way I've been thinking about it is in old school brand workshops, you would have built a brand archetype. So brand archetype being somebody that represents your brand internally, so whenever you're writing in that tone of voice. So a very quite well known Scottish beer brand, their apparently internal archetype is a 21-year-old laddish boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so even whenever they're, no matter what way they speak, they say, well, would Billy talk like that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something in that, maybe going back to the old school.
Yeah, I think when you think about that, there's another brand that I've touched on in the past, worked on a little bit, which is a noodle in a pot brand, and they have a similar archetype to the beer brand that you mentioned, this 19-year-old lad, similar kind of archetype. And you wonder about how you would make that work. Would you maybe just workshop it out and say, right, you're going to respond like you are Steve. Steve's the brand, and Joe's the customer.
Yeah.
Talk about something you're going to have it. Let's create a conflict, or let's create an interesting topic for you to talk about, and do that for a couple of minutes. Would that then start to throw up interesting little phrases that we could use, interesting sort of turns of language that might actually illuminate what you would do with a chatbot? Maybe it would. The other kind of... Sorry, my mind's gone completely blank.
No. Well, I was actually thinking what you're talking about there about some of the chatbots we've known and loved over the years.
Yeah.
Where you've got your C3POs, or so many robots over the years that seem to have their own voice.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about was the likes of like HAL 9000 in 2001, who's got that cool, aloof, very confident, but wants to be liked. and wants to help, but he's desperately artificial.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Desperately artificial in the way he talks to the crew, and then it all goes desperately wrong. And we think about C-3PO, whose sole function in life is to interpret between different species. There must be millions of languages in that universe. How do you understand each other? You get a robot that helps interpret. Yeah. But he's become this poor, kind of put upon, nervous, obsequious wreck because of that experience.
But that's artificial intelligence. So if you, that's where I wonder where it's going to go, because if, time's up, I'll finish my point. If AI is based on big data and it's always learning, then surely for it to get better, it has to know whether it's made you happy or not, and then change itself. So will chatbots end up a little like C-3PO go, please don't hurt me.
Love me.
Love me. Please love me. That's us. If you want to chat further, take us out for a pint. And otherwise, have a nice day.